Yeah.
I'd like to welcome everybody to this work session. Let's go around the table and identify ourselves for the record. We'll start with you, Alden.
Alden, sir. Municipal man.
Mike?
Mike Chadwick, Control I.
Eric Croft, Assembly.
Pete Peterson, Muldoon.
Forrest Dunbar.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Dick Training.
Rose Bowley.
Okay. Zig?
Zay Berzins.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
Fine. How are you doing?
Real fine. Are you ready to go?
Ready to go?
Okay, let's start. So a new picture, it's a house in construction, but the bottom line, I think, if we go to the next page, is that we are moving forward. We are getting there. So some of the system is in production. That's the good news. There's no question about it. It's been almost 2 weeks now. People have been putting in their time with the Kava clocks, and they've been getting it approved and so forth. So time reporting is there, and that's where we are today. In next Monday, Monday the 2nd, the rest of the system's going to get turned off. Okay? Everything's looking good. It's moving forward. The corrections that crop up are being made and so forth. So that's looking pretty good. So that activity is happening right over the next couple of weeks. And I say the next couple of weeks because we are 2 weeks in arrears or 10 days in arrears before paychecks come out. Okay? So that'll be the next major interesting item in terms of the actual paychecks coming out. You'll notice that this 2016 transactions are being loaded as we speak. Shortly thereafter, the 2017 transactions will be loaded. The master data, which is all the account numbers and charge numbers and all that other kind of thing, staff, employee numbers, all that's been loaded. And then we'll start with purchases Monday. So in essence, that's saying HCM is pretty much on its way. Philo, which is the finance and logistics, is pretty much on its way. The reason why this blue line is out here going longer is that we have to wait until we get PeopleSoft closed so that we can move all that PeopleSoft data in for the prior month, so that when we do the closing in November, we'll be able to be looking at October data.
If some members have questions, please raise your hand and I'll call on you so we can get the question and answers. We're working our way through this.
Okay, let's
Right,
go
Zig.
on. So this is just repeating, Kava time reporting is being used. All three methods for entering time, which is the wall clocks, web, and phone, they're all being used. It's all happening. Okay?
Zig, let me interrupt you for a second. Zig, Alda, we're going forward with Kava. There was no going back to the old system. I heard rumors. They were thinking about going back the old way of
That's
keeping
exactly
time.
what it is. It's a rumor.
If you're referring to Chronos, which is a word
Yes.
you don't like to use, I'm sure you.
I'm not using that word.
You would be very interested if that word ever came back up again, since the clocks have been removed, and I think we've taken them out to the dump.
They're
Okay.
gone.
Just want to make sure I'd heard a rumor.
I don't know where that came from.
That's all it is.
Okay.
There's no substance.
Go ahead,
So
Zig, sorry.
Employee self-service is active. Manager self-service is active. There were some performance issues early on, and they found out what it was. It was a technical glitch, and they solved it. So the performance issues have died off.
I was just
People are
using
not
it
calling
downstairs a minute ago, and it is working. Thanks to Rose's help.
So we need to recognize that we've got a major contract for taking care of the infrastructure, which is HEC, and that's a 3-year contract for $8 million. That's in play. So we need to recognize that that's going on right now, and data is being transmitted to wherever it goes. Santa Clara, thank you. And we now realize, and we also need to know that things are transitioning in the IT organization locally here. The MOA IT organization is now much more actively involved. I do want to tell everybody, because we're doing time reporting, payroll is under a lot of pressure right now. They're the ones that are getting the calls. Okay, just under a lot of pressure. An awful lot of the calls were typical and inconsequential, but there's a high volume, and those calls mainly were all about how do I get in, what do I have the rights to do, and I mentioned the performance thing earlier. Most of the calls right now that are happening are MSS related, so they're all about reviewing and approving time cards. And that's kind of a new process for a lot of people. okay?
Zig,
And
let me
there are
interrupt
some
you for a
questions
minute.
about time rounding.
Let me interrupt you for a minute.
Sure.
Rose, we're down there working this issue and making assignments for time cards, so it does work. But it's odd to figure out how you do that, so. But it's working.
Creating some substitutes for Dick so
Well,
he doesn't
I
have to
think,
approve all
I
the
think
time.
the thing that everybody's going to start seeing over the next few weeks, first of all, it's an integrated system, so that means things are connected and linked together that were not linked together before. So you're going to start seeing that. You're going to start seeing impacts. And the other thing you're going to start seeing is you're going to start seeing the fact that this is a system that requires rigor. It requires rigor and discipline. Can't get away with some of the things you could get away with before.
So you're telling me we have a German system, not a French system?
That is correct. It's
Okay.
a German system.
Just thought I'd check.
One of the modules is entitled Control. What does that tell you?
I know where it's made. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What exactly do you mean by rigor?
That you have to go through the steps appropriately and in sequence. You can't skip things, you can't go around things, you can't say, gee, I'd like to just kind of tweak this over here. No, you got to follow the process. So you're going to have to follow the screens, follow the transactions, and there's going to be an awful lot of people that are going to want to take shortcuts. That's not the way I did it before. I didn't go straight here. And now it's going to say, no, you got to balance that transaction before you do that.
In fact, if you want to put your military history down, you have to go to a subsection to how you can put down you're actually a military veteran or disabled or whatever. And then when you get into necessity, it only gives you a few selections.
So what you're saying is the system doesn't allow you to be creative.
Probably
Absolutely.
a pretty good way of putting it. Germans are not considered to be very creative.
The train runs when it's
We also
supposed to be
had
there.
conversations earlier today about, if you've got receipts coming in, are you going to have an invoice for that receipt? Same thing with purchase orders. When the famous 3-document match is going to be enforced by the system. People are not used to that. So it's going to say, oh, well, you can't pay that until you have prove that you got it. You got to have a receipt to match the purchase order. Those, again, examples of rigor. Okay, let's go on. So what's going on right now? The training is going on. The general feedback is relatively positive. They're almost done. They're staying on pace. Okay. The thing we got to remember though is that the team identified training that would not be included in this particular time frame, which means that it's sitting out there waiting. Okay? Most of your consultants are working on defects, and let's make sure we understand that term. SAP refers to them as defects. What they're saying is the system is not matching the technical specification. That's the defect. You're going to hear some conversation later on about you're going to hear conversation about program change requests. Changes are not defects. What somebody's trying to do is they're trying to change what the functional and technical spec says. And then you got to program it to match. Does that make sense? Okay. So cutover, this is all the business of loading data. That's moving along quite well. They've got daily calls. They're staying on top of it. They did have a glitch last week. It was the same thing that's caused a glitch for the last 3 months. And that's clarifying and cleaning up grants data and getting it loaded into the system. They've had to do some restarts. They had to do some rework last week because, again, they had problems with trying to change up the way grants are structured. Okay? So let's talk about change management. I just want you to know I'm a proud wearer of the buttons. Got the buttons. Okay, they're all out there. People are using them. Although let's go back for just a second. I did not understand why somebody decided to pick a porcupine. I've got a real problem with that. So we got this animal out here shooting spikes and I don't know. So the other thing, I think you see these hanging around on the walls. So it's out there. They're talking big about it. It's good. Next slide. This is a picture of what is in front of or on top of or beside every Kaba clock. And I laud the mayor. The mayor stood up to be counted. He's right there taking his picture with this silly thing. Okay? But the instructions for how to use the clock are right there. Okay, let's take a look at the training outlook. This is all part of OCM, Organization Change Management. Training is a key piece of it. Just want to make sure we recognize that not all training has been completed. I'm very concerned that people are going to poo-poo that and let it slide. But we also need to understand that we have a skills issue here. The OCM leader who is gone, he's finished, basically says, I don't think we got the skills in-house to sit there and use the tools necessary to complete the training material. That's a concern. Also, as we move forward and start transitioning into other people focusing in on trying to take care of this system, he's recognizing that nobody seems to want to talk to or include the OCM people as they plan some of the changes going down the road. There's going to be continuing changes to the system. There's going to be a need for some continuing training. These people need to be tuned in. They need to be part of that organizational group that focuses in on what's going to happen. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Suzanne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Meg.
In terms of not having the ability to complete the training materials, are you talking about the IT staff, or the training for, maintaining the program, or training for the users?
It's the training material. A lot of it is PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay, for the user, for the attendees when they sit in a classroom. But the other thing is samples. Okay, where you go into the system and you literally try things, and so you've got those. All of that stuff is built in and connected into a tool called UPerform. That's the tool that people don't know how to use very well.
So
And the people who are doing that, there's currently a team of people who are part of that, who are in essence MOA personnel, who are part of that OCM change team. But there were also contractors. And they were the people who were creating these samples and creating the guidelines and creating all the PowerPoint things. They're the ones that were doing all that stuff, and now they're going away.
Mm-hmm.
The contractors are going away, and what we have left are the folks who are here. And there's a tendency, I think, for everybody in the community to consider with ER, our human resources people are the ones who are experts at training, supposedly.
Good luck.
Good luck. I don't know. Okay, so it just says we need to be aware that there is a skill shortage, and there's probably going to be a staffing shortage, because they may end up getting pulled onto something else, because all of a sudden the importance of this is going to start slipping. Does that make sense? And that's one of the concerns.
Now, as far as training, we have a training session tomorrow for every assembly member from 12 to 12:30. They're going to take you to what for?
We're gonna go downstairs to room 700, it's a computer lab. And at the last Budget Finance Committee meeting, there was some expression of assembly members not having been able to get on. So we're gonna have Kelly Lewis
We want to
there
make
to
sure
walk
every
people
assembly
through.
member can sign on to the system.
You
So
can
from
reset
12 to
passwords
12:30,
if necessary.
please be here.
Here you go.
Go ahead, Zig,
I think
sorry.
It's a fantastic thing, if I might, Mr. Chairman, that you get questions about SAP all the time. I think it would behoove you to be able to say, I've been in the system.
Been there, done that.
You've seen the porcupine.
So, further agree with your comment to be able to get it.
Next slide. Last month, I provided you with a list of what was identified from the parallel testing of known differences. They were kind of interesting, okay? And it has to do with the way things are going to appear, the timing, and some of the calculations. In other words, the checks are not necessarily going to be exactly the same, but everybody knows this. Well, the team knows this. The problem we're faced with here is, as I understand it, the folks who are union folks have been informed and they know about this. Known differences. I'm talking about this during our organization change management, because you gotta manage expectations. Well, the folks that are non-union have not been informed. And I sure hope somebody does something about that before they have a check show up in 10 days.
Why would the total, sorry, but
Go ahead, sir.
why would the calculation of the total be different? I can understand dates and presentation.
I'm
Alden?
gonna answer a different question.
Oh, sorry.
Well, go ahead and answer that.
Let me answer the first one. I believe when he's referring to union, he's talking about union leadership. The municipality employees on the whole have not been communicated. There'll be a communication tomorrow, Tuesday, and Thursday next week.
Good.
When they say union representation, that means that they've gone to the union, the leads, or the IBEW and that, and let them know about this. But I don't believe the union employees know any of this. So we have 3 communications going out over the next week. That was the part I wanted to
Okay, what's
answer
about
there.
Timing of benefits.
No, this really isn't real till their check.
We used
And
to
that's
have-
where we're gonna get everybody's attention when people look at their checks.
It's-
If there's one penny missing, we're gonna hear about it.
Well, here's your
If you're
major
taking-
known difference
If
coming
you're
up.
taking deductions out over 2 periods versus 1, people are used to seeing, a different number and a different amount. Now, what they get paid for the entire month is still the same, but it's being taken out on different paychecks. That's a known difference that we want to be able to communicate. And the other big issue is that the pay stubs are gonna look different. Things are in different areas and that kind of stuff. So, pay attention. I'm sure, since you're on the email list, you will get it. There'll be a basic communication telling them, watch Tuesday and Thursday next week for written pay stubs and what they're gonna look like and the changes that are happening. But that is gonna occur over the next week.
Good.
For assembly member, one change has already been for your A's or your assistants, whatever you wanna call them. They got their checks on the 21st of this month. They did it early because of the system coming online. They paid them early. So whoever you've got doing it already got their checks for this month.
Next page.
Go ahead, sir.
For the last 2 months, I've been giving you a recap of where we stand with the policy changes. And the bottom line is I do not have any update from 2 months ago. I keep asking. So as of 2 months ago, we had 101 policy changes that were supposed to be reviewed and approved by the mayor. He has received none as of 2 months ago, and that's all I know. Needless to say, you're starting to go live. It makes sense to have policies in play. Okay, let's talk a little bit about cost. I mean, this is gonna be kind of a continuation of what you've been seeing. I think the only thing I need to tell you is that I don't know if I'm gonna get the source information for this after this week. Okay? Because in essence, the project team has dwindled to nothing next week.
There's 2 left?
We will have
More than that.
five people on the capital next 4 weeks.
So that's a
Otherwise,
straight line.
everyone else is switching to operating and being run by the IT department.
How long is your contract good for? The end of October?
Yeah, I come back the last week of October.
Mike, would you make sure we get him the information he needs? Okay? I know before he can only talk to 3 people, but because we've got him on contract at the end of the month, I want to make sure he's got all the information he needs. Alden, please make that happen. I want him to get all the information he needs.
He will get the information from me that I have. I guarantee that.
Okay.
But my problem is I need to be able to talk to some other folks now. And they are folks that are not part of the project team, they are folks that are part of IT.
Alden, would you
You have
talk to Mike?
I don't name the fact.
Talk to Mike, and Mike, work with him, just make sure we get the information he needs. Because we're at the end of your contract. I appreciate all you've done for us. I just want to make sure you've got all the information you need to get us through the end of this month.
All right, so that one you've seen, that's just an extension, and we're still running at around $2,600, but like I say, it's gonna drop quickly now. In terms of the contract, the capital contract. And you can see that we're still kind of running at almost $500,000 a week, but again, that will tail off very quickly next week. This is kind of a continuing representation of where all the money's being spent. Most of it is on SAP. The reason I put SAP here is because, this is their offshore folks. The blue is all the folks that were here. So you can see right away, you're really looking at about almost 75% of the cost is going to SAP. All right, and then Marchenko's up there at 2%, Peloton's at 26%. Next page. I'm keeping you up to date. What are we going to end up spending? And it's still running right at 82 million. Okay, still running right at 82 million. No major surprises there, other than the fact that we've got a lump sum we still have to pay SAP. I'm sure at some point in time they're going to start asking for their money. Is that fair?
We get paid through April, and I still haven't gotten my $5,007,000, which is gonna cover July, August, and September's bills, so
Okay.
I'm still wanting my investment.
So we're looking now at, we want to talk about this transition to production. It's happening. It's, payroll, the timekeeping, we headed in for the next 2 weeks. Monday, the rest of the system, it's in production. Okay? So these are some of the shortfalls, some things we need to watch out for when you go through such a transition. You got to recognize that there's going to be a very quick rise in change requests. All of a sudden, people say, "Oh, I kind of like it this way." All right? You're going to have an issue with documentation because you got to maintain the documentation for every change. Requires rigor and discipline. Okay, what you're going to see is what's happening is that it's moving to a management by committee model. I guarantee you, documentation will slide like you wouldn't believe. Committees don't follow up. Okay? You performs training, solution manager, also known as soul man. That's where your functional and technical specifications are. That's the whole key of the system is the functional and technical specifications. And then SharePoint is where all the project administration data is. We got to recognize that there's going to be a shortfall for funding. Everybody's tired of spending money. I'm going to suggest you need to come up with more. Okay. The disappearance of subject matter experts with regard to commitment of time. They're all tired. They're all tired. And their bosses want them back on the job. It's hard to say this, but some of them really need to stick around. Okay? The disappearance of product knowledgeable consultant resources. They're gone December. You won't see anybody around here or have even any contact with anybody that knows and understands modules of SAP in December. Reporting completion, we've talked about this before. They keep deferring, pushing off reports. They've done great work, made good headway, but there's still going to be reports that aren't done. Same thing with training. There's some planned training that they just simply deferred, and it's sitting out there. We need to establish a stabilization period and support team. There's a tendency for organizations at the end of a big project, heave a big sigh of relief, walk away. Okay? There's relaxed security. Told you before, I'll say it a million times, SAP is a fully integrated system that requires rigor and discipline. Part of that discipline is security. Who gets to do what? And one of the first things that's going to happen, and it already has happened, is some folks have said, I want access to the system tables. And we're talking about access to the production system tables. I suggest to you that is disaster waiting to happen. Okay? Prioritization with a squeaky wheel. Everybody starts yelling and screaming. I personally was sat in a meeting this week and saw it happen. Somebody called the city manager called Alden. Alden turns to a person and says, take care of it now.
It's called being responsive.
Yeah, well, I've heard IT folks talk about that responsiveness. All they have to have is access to the production tables and they'll fix it for you. Disaster. And this whole business is shifting to a committee management control. Dangerous.
Yes, Suzanne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions. So access to the production system tables, is it users are asking for that? or some of the
IT folks, both,
Okay.
both.
I mean, but we don't want the IT folks to have that access?
Absolutely not. That's
Okay.
the worst person to have access to the tables. The user doesn't know what they're doing with that stuff.
Right,
The IT person thinks they know what they're doing with that stuff.
okay.
Okay, which one is worse?
So that's something that'll
You can have accidents happen with the user. With the IT person, they're actually gonna make changes because they think they know.
So that's something that will have to, in perpetuity, be addressed by consultants then? Is that what I'm hearing, or if there's ever?
Consultants should never touch it either. There's no reason to touch
Okay.
production.
I
You
see.
don't make changes in production. What you do, rigor and discipline, right? What you do is you define a need, you develop it, program it, whatever terms you wish to use.
Okay,
You do you do a functional test on it. The programmer does that, the developer.
mm-hmm,
Then you put it into a test environment
mm-hmm.
and you test it in a test environment fully against all tables, against all interfaces, against all connections. Test it. Then you have someone literally move that to the production environment. That's the only way that the production environment is touched.
okay,
Because otherwise, they start making changes on the fly, they don't document them, start making mistakes. It's a, you know, and your PeopleSoft environment is the result of that. It's just not as complicated as SAP and so forth. It took you longer for the system to degrade to a position where you can't replace it.
okay, so that's not an area that would need any kind of change. I heard your earlier comment, and then on the subsequent slide about the system not matching the specs, and that seems problematic.
Those things happen. I mean, you know, that's what they mean by the, what's the word? D, starts with a D.
Disaster.
No.
Destruction.
No, the errors, defect, thank you.
Okay.
That's what they call a defect.
Okay.
And those happen.
Okay,
I mean, that just happens, you know, and that's what testing is all about, that's what follow-up is all about. It
okay,
happens.
I'm good. Thanks.
The program change requests, that's being driven for a different reason. Okay, let's talk about program change requests. 2016, for the entire year, there were 65. Okay? August 2017, there were 45 change requests. That's while we're trying to finish to go live. That's when everything has been developed, we're into testing, and all of a sudden we want to change the way we want something to look. September, for just 2 weeks, 15 change requests. Extrapolate that, you get 30 or so in September, 35 in September, and there'll be more. They will continue. Okay, so stabilization is going on right now. Basically, we need to say, okay, new functionality requests need to be held to a minimum for the next 3 weeks. Months, excuse me, thank you. Gotta do it. Gotta say, hold off. Let's just get this working smoothly. Corrections regarding appearance, this is what you were commenting on, scrolling, visibility, and all that kind of thing. You gotta put those off. And I guarantee you that everybody's gonna scream about, I gotta have this report look like this. I want this column over on the left. Not the time to be doing that. Not the time to be doing that. Okay, so here are some indications that we're already starting down the slippery slope of losing control. There is no formal knowledge transfer process, particularly with that individual in the pink shirt. He knows all, within reason. But there needs to be knowledge transfer. I mean, if he's going to stop focusing on this system, which is my understanding is going to happen in 4 weeks, somebody needs to be picking his brain. Not happening. There's no apparent change request prioritization criteria. I say apparent because I don't know. I ask. I keep asking. Say, where's your prioritization criteria? How are you going to sit there and decide which things are going to go first? And I guarantee you, when you have a committee that's looking at this, and there's no criteria, what happens? The person who screams the loudest gets theirs done first. There's uncertainty regarding the identification of the executive sponsor. I can't get anybody to publicly say who it is. The closest I come is one individual says, oh, address those questions to the CFO. Okay, but that's all I got. And it appears as if they're already shortcutting the PCR process. They're not being as diligent. They're skipping steps.
PCR again,
A program change request.
yeah, okay.
Okay? So they're starting to skip steps, starting to go around things. IT is starting to ask for access to production tables. I'm going, whoa. I find that nerve-wracking. So, next slide. So this is just a reminder of the things for the next 3 months that really needs to be in play. It needs to be in play. The major thing that is already somewhat in play is, yes, there's a help desk. The rest of these things, not so much. Not so much. Okay, so why do we need to stabilize? I got a picture of a plane there, so let's go with it. That plane will not fly if it doesn't have stabilizers. Certainly not in a straight line. Okay? And I would suggest to you that your system will degrade quickly without the rigor and discipline to give this thing time to settle. That means that somebody has got to sit there and put out some policy statements about, hold off on those program change requests. Or we'll do the change request that only require 20 hours. We're not going to do the change request that requires 320. Those kinds of things need to happen. Okay? So let's go to the next slide. Critical that MOA recognize the need to focus on ensuring, and I'm repeating myself, but I guess I'm trying to say it's really important. It's really important. This kind of stuff is going to happen. People are going to be asking those kind of questions ad nauseum. Many of them are completely unnecessary. I can just say later, or go to the training, go check the documentation. I mean, there's a variety of ways of getting around some of that stuff. It needs to happen, as opposed to somebody being responsive and going into production and changing a table. Like, I'd like that report header to have this on the header. Go in there and change it. That kind of stuff. Okay. So expectations, the help desk must be in place. It kind of sort of is, although I'm not sure it's being staffed well enough yet. A quick response team should be established that's a mixture of subject matter experts, IT, contractors, and current consultants. Okay? What we have is a committee of people. We don't have a team. Okay? Historically, 3 months. I keep saying that because I'm trying to get people to understand that. During the stabilization period, very little work should be aimed at responding to major changes. Got to keep that stuff. So wait till January. Wait till January. There have been 191 program change requests since the very beginning of the project. 121 are closed, leaving 16 have been denied, and 54 are still open. So we're going into transition. We're going into stabilization with 54 open program change requests. And I guarantee you that committee is out there hollering and screaming about their change request and what they want done first. Guaranteed that's going on. Although I don't attend, I don't know. I'd like to attend. Using a range of 40 to 160 hours. You got an easy program change request, maybe that's 40 hours for everything. A tough one, let's say 160 hours, okay? I don't know what they are. I don't know how they're stratified. They should be. Somebody should be planning that. They should be laying them out and saying, this is easy, medium, and hard. Because you got to recognize, if you do all 54, the low end, if it's 40 hours for all 54, is 2,100 hours. That's one person year. 1 person year. If you do all 54 and it's 160 hours for each, at the high end, 8,600 hours, over 4-person years. Backlog work, and that's just program change requests. Nothing new, no new modules, nothing else. Things like, I want that to look this way. Prioritization criteria becomes crucial. It's in bold. I'll say it 1,000,000 times. I don't think it exists. Again, I don't know. I need to find out. I need to be able to talk to some folks. Next page. So, how do we handle this? Because I was saying earlier, you really don't want to go down the path of running this thing with a committee. Okay? And that's apparently what's there today. So the executive steering committee should stay in place and should continue to operate as a steering committee for this activity. You need executive oversight. An executive sponsor should be identified. Yep, I think Alden's the best person for that. If Alden's not the person, then okay, it needs to be somebody. The most likely person from an executive sponsorship perspective is someone that I would suggest is non-technical, ergo it ought to be the CFO. Okay, CIO is all IT. You sure don't want to sit there and say this is an IT solution. It's not an IT solution. It's an enterprise-wide business solution. Stabilization program manager seems to have been identified. I think that person's been identified. But I'm not sure who they're responsible. 2 and 4. I'm unsure. I think she reports to Robert. Well, she reports to CIO, but then she defers to, again, confusing. Okay? A stabilization quick response team of both MOAIT, continuing subject matter experts from the project team, and existing consultants should be positioned. It should be a team. Okay? Suggest most of the single individuals per area be allocated 80%, 4 out of 5 days. That's what I was saying earlier. I hate to say it, but you've got to get some of those subject matter experts to kind of continue for the next couple of months. Can't go back to their home department other than 1 day a week. Functioning advisory committee, that's the committee that exists today that's trying to make all kinds of decisions. They can continue as an advisory group. Okay, let me show you what, this is what I think the quick response team ought to look like. Okay, there's the list of the folks on the left-hand side that's on the quick response team. This is not counting the consultants and contractors. This is internal folks with the exception of basis. The basis person is the person that moves the test environment to the production environment. That's what that person does. Now, over here, I've indicated approximate estimates of time that they should be committed to the stabilization team. I've also indicated with a green check mark who's there. The rest of them, I don't know. Somebody needs to figure that out. Somebody needs to make some commitments. Somebody needs to say, okay, I do know. Because as long as they're members of a 30 to 60 person committee, nobody's going to make commitments. Nobody's going to be accountable. Okay? Let's talk about the contract resources. The bottom line, I think Alden was saying earlier, there's a few people that are staying on that are part of the capital project, and they're finishing the cutover. And that's what I showed you in the very beginning. It runs out to the end of October. That's what they're doing. That's what Alden's doing, is to oversee those few people. The rest of the contractors and consultants are in essence available to the IT organization, and they are being funded to IT operating. That's how that's happening. But they are on a short leash also. The few that are staying, there's about 8 of them, round numbers, are going to be here on site in October. They're going to work remote in November. They disappear in December. Okay? Let's go on. SAP is a tightly integrated system that requires rigor and discipline. I've said it, and I'll say it again, and I would suggest
About 10
making
times all.
changes to SAP is like whack-a-mole. Do you remember this when you went to fairs, state fairs and all that? You hit one thing and another one pops up? That's what happens with SAP. You make a change in the table and something's gonna happen out there and you won't like it 9 times out of 10 because you didn't check it. Okay, so let's talk about, your history. PeopleSoft doesn't have a great history. It started out fine, but making changes eventually that weren't documented, eventually it led to that system being so modified and so changed that you couldn't upgrade it. Could not upgrade it. And once you couldn't upgrade it, the system started to generally decline. And to the point where technically it was even having a problem. There are questions of whether or not the databases were big enough, and all kinds of things like that were happening. Which is what led you in 2011 to say, we gotta replace it. Now, and the other bad thing is when things didn't get done, people started turning to spreadsheets. Project that ended up on spreadsheets. Grants ended up on spreadsheets. Fixed assets ended up on spreadsheets. All created a problem getting into the new system. Grants continues to be a problem getting into the new system. But it's because PeopleSoft got monkeyed around with it a little too much. Now, remember this number. PeopleSoft has, round numbers, 10,000 tables. That's a lot of tables, right? A lot of files that you've got to kind of synchronize and organize and recognize and know what's going on. Let's change the page here. My very first line here. That's how much more complex SAP is. There are approximately 30,000 tables in SAP. Here's an example of something that PeopleSoft did when I've implemented several times. PeopleSoft built their system based on HR, human resources. That was their base system. They went out and purchased the financial piece, sold those two pieces together as an ERP solution. Big problem. The financial database and the HR database weren't connected because they were two different vendors, two different designs. It was a mess. It was a mess. Continues to be a mess. That does not occur with SAP. I can tell you that every table, every file,
They're integrated.
very tightly connected.
Zig, they're integrated under SAP versus the other way into PeopleSoft.
Right.
Two separate operating systems, two separate programs.
SAP built everything. They have purchased some add-ons, but the core is SAP. And that's because they built it all off of the control module. Okay? Again, the Germans, So it's tightly integrated. Changes in configuration, and by the way, I was born in Germany. I have a funny name, what are you going to do?
Some of my ancestors were Prussian, so it's still Germany.
So I'm a Latvian. I'm not a German. I'm a Latvian. Okay, changes in configuration, business rules, structure, and so forth are almost guaranteed to affect other tables. You start doing that, okay? Errors have a tendency to pop up unless the chain of effective tables isn't thoroughly reviewed. That's this whole business of diligence, rigor, discipline. When you make a change, you got to check everything else out. And if you don't, you get into trouble. Which is why you need to have these people who know and understand the modules in SAP and know and understand the tables. Okay? Folks in IT, I think they may have one person. Okay? Which is why they got outsourced in the first place 2 years ago. It's hard to get those resources here. So making changes in a reactive manner tends to lead to the documentation being overlooked or bypassed. Happened with PeopleSoft. Make change in PeopleSoft, don't document it. Unless you have the person who did it, corporate memory disappears quickly. So I will say this one more time. Allowing access to production software and the tables is an invitation to disaster. There needs to be a policy from the IT organization or from the executive steering committee, you name it. It's got to basically say, thou shalt not touch our production environment. Period, end of story. And I guarantee you there's going to be folks that are going to say, but we can be more responsive. We can make that change quicker because they really need it. They really want it. What happens is that stuff just starts snowballing on you. Oh, we're just going to do it once. Once you give them access, you can't take it back. It's almost impossible. So let's talk about what's going on in the future. We've got a few more minutes. I want to talk to you about the systems lifecycle. This is a fairly typical, you figure out, software degrades, you figure out you need something, you acquire a solution, you develop it, you implement it, you use it, you maintain it, you upgrade it, and then, or after time, it starts degrading again, and then maybe X 20 years or 25 years from now, you say, I got to have a new one. Pretty much typical life cycle. Very quickly, this is where you are. PeopleSoft ended up out there degrading, and now you are basically, you've just implemented SAP. That's where you are. But you see, you still have the rest of this life cycle to focus in on. It doesn't end. It doesn't end. Let's go to the next slide. So it took us 6 years to get here. How long is it going to take to go through here? 15, 20? Okay. This, from here around to here, that's what you're going to depreciate when you start talking about depreciation expense and your capital expense. Okay? So the point is there's more to this system coming at you. This is also going to require resources. You've got to remember this. It doesn't come free. Doesn't come free. So yeah, you spent a lot of money and a lot of time, a lot of people on getting to implementation. Absolutely. But somewhere along the line, stabilization is not free. We just saw the list of people that ought to be involved, and that's kind of the lower peak. But then as soon as you start saying, oh, I want to add a module, I want to, whatever it may be, whether it's budget, whatever it may be, it's going to require resources. You're going to go through this whole business of, capital project, budget, monies, funding. And then when you get to upgrades, look out, Charlie. Okay? Upgrades, that's the one that can actually skyrocket even higher if you make modifications to the system. Okay? That's dependent upon those modifications. Okay? So, one of the reasons why you do an enterprise system like this is that you want to achieve some value. You want to have usefulness. I think we need to recognize that happens over time. That does not happen Monday morning. I guarantee you it doesn't happen Monday morning. You're going to have to go through stabilization, get people used to it, get people using it. All that kind of thing has to happen. So that's, software focus is stage one. That takes you through implementation. These are those same stages just laid out horizontally. Maintenance starts now. Maintenance and support starts now. But if you're going to talk about process improvement, some of those changes that we talked about, people have to be trained and they have to learn that to start using the system. Oh, we're going to match the invoice to this. See what I'm saying? That's happening in stage 2. And then stage 3 is when you start focusing on outcomes, value. Right? From a timing perspective, you get the 3 to 6 months for stabilization. Enhancements probably won't happen for another 12 months. And then I would tell you, SAP says that they issue an upgrade every 3 years, round numbers. Now, you already have eaten up a year of that. So the next upgrade's coming in about 2 years. You're going to have 2 years.
So one thing you might add is on upgrades, SAP has been known to require other things. For example, one of the upgrades we had to go to the HEC storage system. So when we get an upgrade, you're never going to know what else they're adding into it. And PeopleSoft, we didn't upgrade it. This one, if we're committed to it, we've got to continually upgrade it. Whenever they come through, it's not an option.
Yeah.
Good upgrade.
I think the organization needs to have a policy statement, if that's what it takes, that says we will keep this product current and up to date. You would be wasting your money if you did not do that. You really need to do that, but you've got to recognize that we're now going to talk about it, that it's going to require resources. So let's take a look at total cost of ownership. This system is an enterprise system, okay? The trap that the administration and you can fall into is if you start breaking it apart. An example is this ERP system is of no value to you if you don't have the time clocks. They are part of this. Are they part of the SAP contract? No. Are they part of the SAP licensing? No. But the total cost of ownership for your enterprise solution includes Kava. This is where I'm coming from. Well, that's just one piece. So as you're going to see in just a second, I have a very strong recommendation to the Assembly, and that recommendation is this. You should continue to have monthly reports from the administration regarding the system's total cost of ownership. I mean, getting a report from Alden next month, kind of small stuff. He can tell you the total is he's achieved so far in the project and so on, but the rest of the stuff you're not going to have, and so you need to be saying, okay, I want to hear about the total cost because now you want to know about the operating cost, because the operating cost is now kicking in, and trust me, the operating cost is much larger than you think it is. Okay, so let's talk about the cost drivers very quickly. This is a list of what I went through in terms of creating a detailed spreadsheet to figure out what's driving the cost. I'm thinking now in terms of post-go live production environment. So you got license fees for software. You may acquire some new modules. This is an interesting one. Oh, by the way, in addition to license fees for the software, you also have an uplift for HANA. The administration decided that you're going to get this new fancy database. Guess what? Annually, they want 15% of your total spend on SAP products every year. Okay? It's going to come back and you're going to see that number and you're going to go, whoa. You've got these existing contracts for HEC and AMS. You certainly have to develop those program change requests, internal support, upgrades, completion of known enhancements. Contract support will be needed because you don't have the internal resources to do a lot of this work. And oh, by the way, don't forget every year you have to do an update to the software for taxes. Ring a bell? Tax rates change every year. So there's your numbers. Now I went through a lot of estimates and assumptions, but the bottom line is this operating cost, the bulk of those numbers are those contracts that you've already signed, you're already locked in. Okay? So the bottom line now is you're looking at next year probably close to $9 million in operating costs associated with the entire effort. And then if you do some capital work, probably $2.2 million.
Zig, I hate to interrupt you,
Yep.
but we lose this room in 1 minute.
Okay. But this is in writing, you can now see it. I mean, you can see that the total is, over 5 years, is $45 million. Sound familiar? Kind of what you spent in the first 5 years.
We'll be out here in a minute,
Okay.
man.
No rush.
So my closing thoughts, if you'll, these are just some of the questions and things that you need to think about. The one I think I want you to all see on here is there is a module that SAP is pushing called Success Factors, and your organization, your ER group is very excited about this, but it happens to be software as a service, which means that you're renting it, which means that you're going to be paying every time you hit the button. Okay? It's not a license approach. The other thing I think you should know that's not on here, that I was told by their sales guy yesterday, said all of SAP is going to be in the cloud in 2025. Think about that one. Okay? So let's go to the last slide. So some closing thoughts. Preserve the project momentum. The administration needs to keep this thing going. The stabilization period. And the rest of this is all about funding. You need to recognize, the administration needs to recognize that it's not inconsequential, that it is serious. You will be spending more money, okay? But I don't think you can afford not to.
Thank you, Zig. Appreciate it. If you got any questions or comments, we can get them to him through Mike. This work session's over with.